Alex, it's great to chat with you. Thank you so much for the time.
Hi, Steve. Thank you
Hi.
for making the time.
Oh, absolutely. Beehive's a lot of fun. Um, I was wondering where did it come from?
Uh, well, I was fortunate to grow up on my parents' farm out in I grew up on farmland out in South Langley, which is like the Fraser Valley and Lower Mainland in BC. Um, and so I guess growing up on the farm, we have like a lot of, I don't know, like I'm sure you've experienced, you see a lot of sort of strange things in nature growing up, in the logs or just walking around, or you're chopping wood, or you're um, at the pond in there's like pond in the back forest, and we see a bunch of like I don't know if you've ever seen like exoskeletons of dragonflies, and they look like otherworldly or not from this not from this planet, and you start thinking as a kid like about other creatures and life and things like that. So I think it's probably a lot influenced from that sort of experiences.
It feels very personal in a lot of ways, and you can almost I like the fact that it's told sort of through a child's eyes because it almost you can really feel the sense of just not knowing what's going on around you
Mm, right.
through by the perspective in that way. Absolutely. The young girl, I forget. I'm sorry, I can't think.
Rosemary, yeah.
She's phenomenal in this. She does a
Oh, thank
wonderful
you.
job.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, she's been getting a lot of attention for her role, and I'm really happy about it. I think everyone does a good job from the cast. They're all they're not union, so that's impressive too.
Mm.
We cast non-union actors. Um, so yeah, I really hope they get. I mean, the Aunt Zoe, the auntie, she's never acted. This is like her first
Wow.
on-screen thing, so like that's really exciting too. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Let's talk about bees. Why did you want to focus in on the bees for this particular film? Like they're always present
Mm.
and also also feels almost ominous in the distance in so many ways. What was it? Why did you want to take them and make them the beginning of your monsters, if you will?
That's a really good question. I think it has probably almost like a lot of answers though, in different directions, because the little girl, Rosemary, so she mistakes the at the start of the film, right? She sees a wasp nest and she calls it the beehive, and then she sees another one, and so then sorry, then she labels that one be the beehive, right? She's thinking she's connecting them to bees. So there's that childhood innocence,
Mm.
of just sort of throwing your, like children do, throw their imagination onto things. Um, so I I think that's there's that naivete, that innocence of a child that then is, I think that theme is sort of explored when we come up to things in the world that are, when we're so innocent and we don't understand that there's forces in the world that are, you know, that can hurt us.
Mm.
Um, and she kind of goes through that by the end of the film. You kind of see that she kind of goes through that transformation of, growing up, or coming face to face with those realities. um and then I would sort of say there's other sub layers, sub themes of, I would say, the environment, and sort of how we treat nature and how we treat the environment, and how we sort of ignore the other species, as
Mm.
we sort of tend to think that we are the most important. But sort of, my belief is more that we're all in this together, with the other species in the on the planet, and you can extend that to the universe, and you can extend that further. So yeah.
And, and you talk about that being all in it together. One of the things about this film that really struck me is as much as it's about an alien invasion and all of these things, it's really about grief and denial and wrestling with hurt. Um, and I guess one of the themes that kept sort of coming up for me was this idea of when to run and when to fight. And I get the
Mm.
sense that so much of that both stems to, especially the father emotionally, but also to the family. And I was wondering for you, your opinion, when is it time to run and when is it time to fight?
Oh wow, that's such an interesting question. Um,
I hope so.
yeah, I think you hit on something there, which is for sure the dad in this story at all costs wants to stay put, stand his ground, and protect his property and what he considers his land. Um, and versus sort of the auntie who understands what's going on and just wants to get out and save the future generation, save the children. um and so yeah, I mean, if you were to say who do I identify with, I mean, I think it's complicated in the sense that like I said, we're all in this together. I think that um we all can identify with different characters in the story, and I think that there's sort of all of a bit of this in all of us. Do you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
I mean, I think that we can see that the father, he makes some wrong decisions, and he has some maybe views that we don't agree with, but at the same time we can see that he really loves his kids, and he was made a mistake or whatnot, but at the end of the day, he really does love his children, and it is tragic that you know where things go. um but yeah, and I guess just to say that I think there is themes of survival in the story as well, that you know they're trying to just make it out alive, and how much of life is that struggle for survival.
For sure. I mean, that comes through absolutely. I wanted to ask you too. It was very interesting because there's a lot of this film. I see. We spend. I feel like we spend a lot of time listening to other people and their opinions, if you will. And I don't mean the characters. I mean sitting on YouTube. I mean hearing it over the radio, and you just hear people say, "Oh, it's no big deal. It's no big deal." But there's a fascinating conversation, and I think it's with Dave. And he says, I can't keep track of the news now, and how do you think it affects us all this bad news day in and day out?" And I wondered if that was something you were trying to get across, and if so, how is it that this emphasis on bad news affects us, in your opinion?
Oh, 100%. And thank you for pointing that out. um yeah, I mean, I think the movie's asking that question. I think that's there. And then it's up to us to sort of reflect on it. Um, in the sense that I don't have the answer, but 100%, you know, I do feel that that overwhelming sense of, you know, it's we I question, because of the way that technology goes and how quickly things go. We're not, as humans, we're not accustomed to, um, I guess, getting this sort of constant 24 hours news cycle. That's, you know, the constant. And I'm sure you experience. I'd be curious to hear your answer to that question. You know, being a journalist and uh, you know, constantly having to be connected with social media and with media in general. Um, so yeah, it's sort of that thing where I think the movie's trying to point to this thing where um, we unfortunately we become numb to news, and we become numb to it, to a point where we're sort of looking for maybe the next news, the next piece of thing that might hit our dopamine receptors or whatever. But yeah, that's the sort of unfortunate thing, is it's sort of questioning, I guess, like and I hope it's not cynical, but it's sort of asking what would happen if a pandemic alien invasion were to happen like this, sort of underneath our noses, if we saw, well, I mean, I don't want to get too much into a rabbit hole, because I know there was like a few months ago, there's like over the summer, there was some alien news, and I don't even mean the Mexico thing, but there was some of those interesting Congress
Yeah.
things and stuff like that. And it's interesting how quickly the news cycle just, and I'm not trying to be conspiratorial here. I'm just trying to say that it's interesting how quickly news just flows over and flows over, and we're just washed. It just, everything just sort of washes, news just washes news in a sense. And yeah, so it's sort of hopefully that well, it's great that you mentioned that, because it's I'm glad when people sort of notice those things.
Well, and within this film too, of course, you talk about it washing over us. Then you have characters missing what's actually happening.
Absolutely, yeah.
You've got all this so many voices speaking and just telling everyone to calm down and just ignore it. That when there's an actual problem, people aren't willing to pay attention because there's so many other things to think about. And I think that fits in this film, like the invasion, whether it's the invasion or the imposition of the land. These are things that matter in this story, but nobody's paying attention because there are too many other people saying, "Don't worry about that. Just think about this thing." It's interesting to see how that all sort of plays out.
Right, and that the truth is nebulous, that it's hard to, now we don't we question what is true. We really question, like, we have two sides, and to me, the truth is, they're both sides, right? There's truth on, there's two sides to every coin, kind of. And I think that we stopped listening, and we sort of just say this, no, it's this, or it's this, right? And I think Frank, the character of Frank the father, and Aunt Zoe sort of represent this in the film in some way, right? They're these two sides that are not listening to each other. They're just sort of screaming or yelling, or they don't meet. And I think that's probably kind of representative of somewhat of where we're at.
Yeah, absolutely. There's that push and pull anytime they're on screen together, uh,
Hmm.
and just trying to,
Tension.
yeah, that tension that I think comes through really well. Um, Alex, the film's a lot of fun. What do you hope people take away from their time with the Beehive?
Um, well, I hope they take away some things of what we talked about, I guess. I hope that they I guess ultimately, as a filmmaker, what I hope is that I can make films that are both engaging and entertaining. Um, and then added to that, what I'm proud about with this film is also we're seeing indigenous characters that are resilient in everyday situations. So it's, of course, like I say to others that are in the indigenous community and working in film, that I think we need those stories of, we need to tell the hard stories, but we also need to tell see indigenous characters in everyday stories. So that's also an important takeaway for me.
I actually really appreciate that aspect of it for sure. There's incredible diversity in the sense of the cast of bringing indigenous people in a different type of story that we often see. And I think it's so much fun. Thank you, Alex. Thank you so much for your time. I
Oh
really
no,
appreciate it.
thank you, Steve. I really appreciate this interview. It was really good.
Thank you so
Like,
much.
good
Have a great day.
questions. Yeah, you too. Thanks a lot.
Thanks. Bye bye.